Welcome back to the FPL video and podcast. This will be the best wildcard team for Game Week 3. If you want to see an updated version in a couple of days time, smash the like button of this video and subscribe for new. Our aim is to get this to over 200 likes on YouTube and to keep on pushing towards 35 subscribers. Also keep your eyes peeled for a team selection video and also the predicted lineups. All of that could be headed your way in the next couple of days, and the same goes for the deadline stream on Saturday. Be sure not to miss it as well by clicking the notification bell on this channel. There are also many other links in the description below, including Draft Town, which you can see on screen, and they have so many different tools, including the fixture analysis, and at the moment you can see it ranked in terms of chance of scoring over 2+ goals for Game Week 3. Man City are top. For Game Week 4, it would be Man City once again, and Liverpool would actually take the lead for Game Week 5. For Game Week 6, we see Arsenal, and in Game Week 7, it's pretty close, but City are top there yet again, with Arsenal, Chelsea and Liverpool just behind. Be sure to check out the link in the description below for Draft Town. The same goes for my Twitter and Instagram, the Discord server, FPL League, my Patreon, and the championships. But without further ado, let's jump straight into it. In FPL, we start with a 100 million budget, but there have been a lot of price changes over the last week, particularly over the weekend. So this team will actually cost approximately 99.8 million at the time of this recording, but there could be several price changes overnight, so this could easily go to 100+ million by the Wednesday or Thursday. So keep your eyes peeled for those price changes, and if you are activating the wild card, try to do it as early as possible so you can gain a bit of team value, or at least locking those players that you're kind of set on going for, and ensure that you have them before their prices go up, so it makes it easier to afford your ideal 50-man squad. I'm going to start off with the two goalkeepers, and then as usual work my way through the defenders, midfielders and forwards, and I'm going to go for a premium option between the sticks. Just like last week, I'm going for David Raya, who has been exceptional so far this season, making some brilliant saves in both victories against Wolves and Aston Villa. 8 points followed by a double-digit haul away from home at Villa Park. David Raya is the go-to goalkeeper at the moment, but the next 3 fixtures are very tough for the Gunners. Brighton at home, then it's Tottenham and Man City away after the international break, but thankfully is followed up by 3 very promising fixtures against Leicester, Southampton and Bournemouth, and 2 of those fixtures are at home. But I'm not going to deny the fact that the next 3 game weeks don't look great for the Gunners defensively. It wouldn't surprise me if they didn't keep a clean sheet, and based on the first 2 game weeks, David Raya has been exceptional, but I think the defence has been a bit lackluster compared to last season, but it is early days. The expected goals conceded figure is almost 2, so they should have conceded a goal by now, and maybe they are due to concede a goal in Game Week 3 against Brighton, which will not be an easy game whatsoever. Both teams have the same goal difference and points scored after the first 2 game weeks of the season, but I still think David Raya is the best goalkeeper in FPL until the end of the campaign. If you want to go for a similarly priced goalkeeper, then Alisson has better fixtures and he could outscore David Raya for the next 3 game weeks, but I don't think that'll be the case up until the end of the campaign, or at least until Game Week 19, the midway point of this season. Now I'm going to go for a 4 million option as the backup goalkeeper, and I'm going to go for Bentley, who could actually join Arsenal. He has been linked with the Gunners all summer, and if that were to be the case and Aaron Ramsdale leaves the club, Bentley would become second choice. So you would have the ideal goalkeeper partnership here, but also the kind of downside to that is if you want to triple up on the Gunners between game week 6 to 8, then it will make it very difficult by having Bentley and David Raya if such a move were to happen in the transfer market. So if you want to avoid that sort of scenario, you can go for a Fabianski or Valdimarsson, who also have potential to start the odd game here or there, and they could even usurp the number 1 choices at their respective clubs at some point this season. But Bentley could still get the job done at Wolves and maybe pip Jose Sarr, but it all depends on the last few days of the transfer window. So maybe the Bentley to Arsenal move isn't actually ideal, but maybe in the tougher stretches up until Game Week 11, where you're not thinking of tripling up on the Gunners, you have a pretty good goalkeeper set here of David Raya and Bentley if he joins Arsenal. So in either scenario, I think this could work out pretty well for you. But it's all down to personal preference. I wouldn't focus too much on the 4 million goalkeeper. It's all about the first choice. Some of you might want to go for 2 4.5 million rotating goalkeepers, and Flecken and Steele would work very well in terms of the fixtures. Having said that, Verbruggen could be back in a couple of weeks' time, so I would avoid the Brighton goalkeeper at the moment. I covered Robinson on Monday's podcast for the transfer tips. Be sure to check that out. He has gone up in price to 4.6 million over the weekend. So for those looking to replace Mikalenko, Kwanzaa, or any underperforming 4.5 million or under defender, it will be difficult to get to Robinson. Having said that, it's still possible on the wildcard with the team I'm going to show you, because you are able to stay within budget with only 99.8 million in terms of team value. I think Robinson is the best pick from Fulham in terms of defenders, despite the fact that Joachim Andersen could drop down to 4.4 million, and he should start week in, week out as well. So he's a nice, viable alternative if you can't afford Robinson, or you want to go a bit more differential perhaps. Even though Joachim Andersen's ownership is currently higher, that might change in a month's time. So I would go for Robinson because of the assist threat, a bit of bonus points potential. He got 2 in Game Week 2 to get 7 points overall. So I really like Robinson at 4.6 billion. I've always highlighted him as one of the best budget defenders in the game, and so far he has delivered. Now the next budget defender I'm going for isn't nailed on. This is going to be a risky pick, but it will be kind of accounted for because of the squad depth in this wildcard team. I'm going for Rico Lewis, but I have to stress that at any moment Kyle Walker could come in. It could be in Game Week 3, and my personal prediction is Game Week 4 and beyond after the international break. So don't go for Rico Lewis and then 2 4 million defenders who aren't nailed on, or that you don't trust to start week in, week out, because you need a squad depth in order to cover for Rico Lewis's very heavy rotation risk. So bear that in mind. If he does start most weeks for Man City in the Premier League, I think he's a great 4.5 million defender, but I would be very careful with this pick. Next up though is going to be an expensive player who was subbed off early and had a bit of a bad reaction to that early sub, and that's going to be Trent Alexander-Arnold. In fact, he's been subbed off early in both matches so far under Arne's slot, but I still believe Trent Alexander-Arnold is the best defender in the game until Game Week 8. When Liverpool's fixtures turn, you'd probably gravitate towards Arsenal defenders instead, but for the time being, I don't see anybody better than Trent Alexander-Arnold, although some of you might want to go for a cheaper alternative within the Liverpool ranks like Kanate, or even better still, a Virgil van Dijk or Robertson, who'll be more nailed on than the Frenchman. There are now 2 defender slots left, and one of them is a 4 million defender who should start week in, week out for the next month or so, whilst Matty Cash is out due to an injury, and that is Nedeljkovic, who is an 18-year-old who has been subbed on both times for Matty Cash in Game Weeks 1 and 2, and I believe he will start for Aston Villa in the Premier League. Now with the Champions League on the horizon for the Villains, this will be a tough balance to strike, and there will be rotation, so perhaps in certain games we could see Konsa on the right hand side with Diego Carlos alongside Pau Torres, but Unai Emery discussed this in his press conferences, and his ideal situation is to play Nedeljkovic as the right back and put players in their natural position. He believes Konsa is better suited at centre-back. So for the time being, I think Nedeljkovic is the best 4 million defender, but longer term, you'd probably look at Wout Faes, who's now gone up to 4.1 million, and he's also linked with a move away from Leicester City. He seems disgruntled with the club, according to reliable sources. Harwood Bellis, but Southampton are terrible at the moment, despite some good fixtures. You don't really back them to keep any clean sheets, and Mosquera just conceded 6 goals to Chelsea. So there aren't many 4 million defenders about, to be fair, that really look promising. I think the best 2 are Nedeljkovic and Greaves from Ipswich Town, but there aren't going to be many clean sheets for these newly promoted clubs, so Nedeljkovic is probably your best bet at the moment. And the 5th and final defender has 2 very tough games coming up, but longer term the fixtures are good for Tottenham Hotspur, and I would recommend Pedro Porro. Romero's not a bad shout. He has more goal threat, and he scored 5 times in the Premier League last season. He's also had 2 big chances in this campaign so far, scoring in that 4-0 win over Everton. But I think Porro over the course of the season will get more bonus points, assists, and FPL points overall, so he's a very good option to have in the long run. I'm very happy with this defensive line. The biggest doubts will be Nedeljkovic once Matty Cash is back, and there's always the possibility of rotation, and of Rico Lewis, he's going to be a big risk going forwards, especially when Kyle Walker is knocking on the door. Emil Smith-Rowe had an excellent pre-season and scored in Game Week 2 his first goal for Fulham in that 2-1 victory over Leicester City. I think he'll score plenty of goals this season and also be one of the highest scoring FPL midfielders at his price tag. I really think he offers great value at 5.6 million now, and his ownership has shot up in the last couple of weeks. When I first covered him in pre-season, it was below 3% and it's now over the 20% mark, which shows how popular he's becoming, and he's the second most transferred in, only behind Madueke at the time of this recording. So if you are looking for a budget midfielder, you've got Semenyo, who's very underrated, and I still like him as an option. Rodgers has better fixtures, but he might be less nailed on than Emil Smith-Rowe. My only concern with the Fulham attacking midfielder is the injury record. He constantly got some problems during his time at Arsenal, and fitness issues have always been a persistent problem. But if he can stay fit, I can see him getting the odd 90-minute appearance, and yes, more often than not, he'll probably play 70 to 80 minutes. And as we've seen so far in the first 2 game weeks, he's been subbed off around 60 minutes in the opening game week of the season and then around 70 against Leicester. But let's talk about another budget midfielder who I just mentioned, and I think he's going to be one of the best options over the next 4 game weeks, and that's Morgan Rodgers. If you're not going for Ollie Watkins up front, this is a great way to cover that. You've also got Leon Bailey at 6.5 million, and I still like him as an option, but Rodgers has really caught my eye in the first 2 game weeks despite blanking in both matches, and his performance against Arsenal, a top quality opponent, was outstanding. He got the better of Thomas Partey and Declan Rice several times, and you won't see many midfielders do that against a very stacked midfield like Arsenal. So Morgan Rodgers is definitely one to look at. He might be benched in the odd game, especially when the Champions League begins, and Aston Villa boast so much squad depth, but I think Morgan Rodgers will start more often than not and get 30 plus starts in the Premier League this season if he stays fit. But let's now move on to the big hitters, and I'm going to go for a very consistent option in this midfield, and he's got amazing fixtures until Game Week 7. Then it gets a bit tougher, but he has proven to be a fixture-proof player. He just got 17 points in Game Week 2, and of course I'm going on about Cole Palmer. He is the only Chelsea player I'd really consider. As we've seen with Nkunku, his minutes are just a massive risk. He doesn't even start every single game, and when he does, he is subbed off before 60 minutes, and Madueke could suffer a similar fate despite scoring a hat-trick against Wolves. So Cole Palmer is the only Chelsea attacker I'd highly recommend. But with those fixtures, I wouldn't mind a double or triple up in the short term. It's just not something I'd recommend going forwards until December and January. And a lot of these picks on the wildcard will be long term, with the odd exception like Rico Lewis, who is covered by the abundant squad depth we have here on offer. But Cole Palmer is still going to be one of the highest scoring players in FPL. He might not reach the same standards as last season, but he'll still easily get over 20 goal contributions and perhaps close to 30 again. Next up though is Bryan Mbeumo, who has Southampton at home in Game Week 3. Then it's Man City and Tottenham away back to back. That doesn't look great, but I don't mind starting Mbeumo or Wissa in a game like Tottenham away, where the attackers can still get a lot of opportunities and score a few goals there. But Man City looks really tough at the Etihad, and you could bench him in Game Week 4 because this setup has the squad depth necessary and some nice rotation between certain clubs, as I'll delve into very soon. But the fifth and final midfielder is going to be a nice way to cover Mohamed Salah, because unfortunately you can't have them all and you have to make sacrifices somewhere down the line. But Diogo Jota has had a good start to the season with 1 goal and 1 assist across both game weeks, some decent underlying numbers, and he's playing down the middle for Liverpool at the moment. Will that stick in the long term? Perhaps not, but currently he is the first choice, and unless he gets injured, which unfortunately is a big possibility, or Darwin Nunez/Gakpo really impress in training, I think it's Jota's place to lose, and he's a great way to cover Salah at the moment. Going for him and Trent can somewhat match the Egyptian, who is in great form at the moment with 2 back-to-back double-digit hauls. And some of you might want to go for Salah and Erling Haaland at the same time. It is possible, but you have to make even more compromises with the rest of your squad, and in the long run you'd rather have a balanced team where you don't rely so much on 1 or 2 individuals to save your FPL squad week in, week out. So that is the midfield setup. You're covering a lot of top quality teams in there, but you might be thinking, where is the Arsenal coverage? Saka is still a great option despite the next 3 fixtures being tough. Well, that's where the front 3 come in. Kai Havertz didn't play particularly well against Aston Villa, but in Game Week 1, that combination between him and Saka paid dividends, and I could see them combining for many goals this season. And despite the next 3 fixtures being tough, I still think Havertz can do very well in certain games. He did very well against Tottenham away last season, just a couple of months ago, getting a double-digit haul with a goal and an assist. So I really think he's a good option in these really tough games. He has really stepped up for Arsenal in 2024. His record is outstanding up front, not to mention the 3 fixtures afterwards where Arsenal play 2 newly promoted clubs back-to-back at home in Leicester and Southampton, and Bournemouth away is where Havertz scored his first Premier League goal for the Gunners. So he is still someone worth mentioning. I haven't really seen him discussed too much up front because of Isak, Watkins, and of course a certain Norwegian robot, and that's understandable, but Havertz is still worth including, or at least considering, for your FPL teams. So with this setup, I have gone for Erling Haaland, and with his really hefty price tag, it makes it difficult to go for a Salah at the same time. It is possible, of course, but I want to go for a bit of a balanced 15-man squad here, and Haaland just scored a hat-trick against Ipswich Town. His underlying numbers are always ridiculous, and he single-handedly carried my FPL team this week, as I'll talk about in the team selection video and podcast. And finally, I'm going for a budget striker. There's 6 million left in the bank for those of you with a 100 million budget, or if you're starting off in Game Week 3, and I'm going for the second highest scoring forward in FPL so far in Danny Welbeck. You can also go for Joao Pedro, but I think he's a bit less nailed on, and I could see him being benched in a few games coming up with the signing of Rutter, who could take Joao Pedro's position. So that's something to look at going forwards. But Welbeck has good underlying numbers. He's been in great form all summer. He scored a few penalties in those friendlies, and Joao Pedro was on the pitch at the time, I believe, but I still think that the Brazilian will be the first choice penalty taker. And in the first 2 game weeks, Danny Welbeck has returned in both matches. So I really like this setup. You can also rotate in Mbeumo and Welbeck depending on the fixture. So this week, when the Seagulls visit Arsenal, you can bench Welbeck and start Mbeumo at home to Southampton. And then when Brentford have that tricky visit to the Etihad, you can bench Mbeumo and start Danny Welbeck instead. So I really like the way that Brentford and Brighton rotate. That's why some of you might want to go for Flecken and Steele in goal for now. And you could even do something similar with the 5 defenders and going for these cheap 4.5 million options in that particular position. And there's not only Mbeumo and Welbeck, by the way, there's also Joao Pedro up front, but you can also go for Wissa and Mitoma, which I really like the look of. Let me know which duo you prefer, by the way, Mbeumo and Welbeck or Mitoma and Wissa. I think both of them are really appealing, but I'd personally favour Mbeumo and Welbeck at this moment in time. Let's now head over to FPL.team to discuss the lineup, the captaincy, and other factors moving forwards. There's no question about it, David Raya would start in goal with a back 3 of Robinson, Trent and Rico Lewis. There is a slight debate about benching Trent for a Nedeljkovic or maybe Pedro Porro, but I would go for this defensive setup, and the 5 midfielders speak for themselves. Rodgers, Smith Rowe, Jota, Mbeumo and Cole Palmer, who is the captain, Erling Haaland's the vice, and Kai Havertz up front against Brighton. The bench includes Bentley, Welbeck, Nedeljkovic and Pedro Porro. And going into Game Week 4, I'm not going to show you every single game week under the sun because I think it's going to be a bit overboard. But next week you would have David Raya away to Tottenham, and this would be after the international break. Robinson, Trent and Rico Lewis with very promising fixtures, and you've still got some decent options on the bench like Nedeljkovic and Pedro Porro. But this time we go for a 3-4-3 with Mbeumo on the bench and Danny Welbeck taking his position with that Ipswich Town at home fixture. So that's what I mean about the Brighton and Brentford rotation, which works so well over the next couple of weeks. You can also captain Haaland there and vice captain Palmer, but honestly, I think either one would be a great captaincy contender. The same goes for a Kai Havertz even, and Diogo Jota. So going into Game Week 5, and it's the last game week I think I'll show you with this setup, you do have David Raya away to Man City, and that looks very tough, but afterwards Arsenal's fixtures get much better. You can also start Nedeljkovic, Trent and Pedro Porro with Rodgers, Smith Rowe, Jota and Palmer, Welbeck, Haaland and Havertz with Mbeumo, Robinson and Rico Lewis on the bench. So this 50-man squad works very well. You've got balance, a few risks and differentials like Rico Lewis, but ultimately the fixtures are good for most of these players, and in the long run they will all produce a lot of FPL points. You've also got several captaincy contenders, but if you want to see an updated wildcard team with no Erling Haaland perhaps and a different setup, then let me know down in the comment section below, and smash the like button of this video. getting it to over 200 likes, and let's keep on pushing towards 35 subscribers, which is our goal by the end of the year. Also follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and check all the other links in the description below for my Patreon and the championships for early access to my videos, amongst many other perks, the Discord server, FPL League, Draft Town, and also Spotify. Leave a 5-star review on my podcast. It goes a long way to support my channel. I wish you all the best of luck for Game Week 3 and the rest of the season, and I'll see you next time.